Welcome to Finding Light in Grief, the podcast that takes you on a journey through life, death, and loss. We explore the many facets of grief, sharing stories, insights, and practical advice to help you navigate your own journey. I'm Melanie, a coach who specializes in guiding individuals on transformative journeys through grief and loss. I'm joined by my co-host Andy, a grief coach with a passion for helping people live with intention. Together, we are here to support and inspire you as we delve into these profound experiences. Whether you are dealing with a recent loss or exploring your own mortality, we are here to find the light in the darkness. So join us as we embrace the transformative power of grief and discover the beauty within it. This is Finding Light in Grief.
Hello, Melanie.
Hello, Andy. How are you?
I'm good. We're here again. It's getting to be a bit of a catchphrase. We're here, but we're here.
We're here again. Exactly. We are always here for you and here for our listeners.
Yeah.
Very happy.
And you're globetrotting as always. And I don't think we've done 2 episodes from the same country with you.
Exactly. So yeah, we started the first one in Spain. You were in England and London. So then I was in Germany.
Yeah.
And now I'm in Greece.
Yes. I've boringly stayed in London, although it's quite likely that at some point we'll do an episode and I'll be in Denmark and you'll be somewhere completely
Come on, you're
different.
also traveling. It's just a coincidence. It's not that I'm always traveling all the time. It's just like now the summer. It's always a bit of a travel months or 2-3 travel months actually. No, I'm happy. It's good to have a change of scenery.
Absolutely. We're just international globetrotters.
Exactly. It's inspiring.
Yeah. So what are we talking about today?
So we would like to talk about the 5 stages of grief from Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It's an interesting topic. It's a little bit of a, how can we say, misconception.
Yeah, I would say it's a little controversial.
Yes. Would you like to tell us a little bit about the 5 stages of grief, Andy?
Yeah. So I think the reason we're starting with 5 stages of grief is because it's the one that lots of people have heard of. And it dates back to, I don't know, 1969 or something like that.
Yes.
Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, and she very specifically wrote it for people that were dying. But it's really widely held up as, for a lot of people, the model of grief.
Yeah, it was taught in psychotherapy. It was taught for many years that this is what people are going through. So this 5 stages is just to explain it a little bit to our listeners, for everyone who has no idea about it. It's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. So and she was basically, and this was taught to all psychotherapists, that these are the stages somebody's going through while grieving.
Can I be a real spoil sport?
Yeah.
Not everybody goes through those stages. They don't necessarily go through in that order. And there are lots of other people with lots of other ideas, none of which apply to everybody.
I absolutely agree.
Yeah, so spoiler alert, if you were hoping that we were going to bang on about how everybody's going to go through this particular process, you're done. I mean, that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
I do feel though that it's interesting maybe to look at these different stages of grief, but just held very lightly and with some curiosity.
Yes, it can be sometimes helpful when somebody is completely lost in some kind of emotions while grieving. Sometimes it helps to identify a bit what they are currently going through. So it could be the stage of denial, not wanting to accept the fact, you know, that that somebody is gone. So sometimes it helps just to recognize this. But as you already said, like everyone goes through grief in a very individual and different way. So there is not like one way fits all. But I think, yeah, it can be sometimes helpful to just know about this. But that, yeah.
One of the things that I find it really useful for is because often, and I'm sure it's the same for you, often my clients are dealing with grief that happened a very long time ago. And we might find that we've got these particular emotions propping up maybe 10, 15 years after the event. And now, of course, when we first start talking, that can't be grief, because surely, you know, grief's got a very, there's a limited time on grief. You know, you're not allowed to grieve for more than however long.
That, yeah.
Which again is not the truth. So I find it really useful. I find these stages of grief really useful, but almost pulled apart into individual parts, and then recognizing the things that are coming up whenever they come up, and saying, okay, so you know that we know that, for instance, we can become angry during the grief process.
Yeah.
So this anger that you're feeling now, maybe it's not what you think it is. Maybe it's part of the grieving process. Or you know, our mood is very low, and we don't know why.
Absolutely, and I can just say from my own experience, like when we lost our daughter, I was in. I thought I'm good, but looking back, I was in complete denial for a very long time, for almost 2 years. I just moved on without really grieving and without going through this process of loss. So I would say, looking back, I was just in denial. I wanted to move on. I wanted to like not face the pain of the loss. And my phase of denial took a very long time. Until I was never like this bargaining phase or like stage. I never really had. So I was not looking for somebody to blame or for this one. I would say, for example, I never really had. So that's why this is not applicable to me. So you can see already it's different. It's a different dynamic. Anger, I would say, did I really had anger? I'm not a super angry person anyway, so I wouldn't say yeah, as I said, I was never looking to blame someone. I think it's nature, you know. It's what nature does. It's already miracles. So for me, I was not really angry. I was sad, but I wasn't angry. Depression, I was also not really depressed. So I would really say I had like denial, a lot of sadness, and then the acceptance. So these were my stages. Did you had an experience?
No, I'm just thinking about what you just said, and I know, because we've talked a lot, haven't we? We've talked a lot about Sophie.
Yeah.
And I think if someone had tried to enforce those 5 stages on you, if you'd been working with someone at the time and they tried to enforce those 5 stages on them, you probably, this is me assuming because we've talked, I wonder if you would have assumed that you've gone through the first 4 phases and you were in acceptance. You were still sat in denial, but denial and acceptance can look really similar.
Absolutely true. Yes.
So
yeah, I think this could have happened. Absolutely right. Yeah.
and there's and then when we look at other models that other people suggest as being a possible way that people work through grief, we could probably look at other stages, and we could almost make a patchwork of a bit of William Ward and mixed in with a bit of Kubrick, and just create this hybrid model of grief.
You are so right, Andy. It's and you need to see the individual person. It's everyone reacts differently to a situation, to an event. It's and I have a couple of, not a couple, I have a lot of different clients. They all react differently to grief, and you need to pick what's right. Although I have to say, there is one theory, when I would like to share my favorite theory. It's from
that's very geeky, isn't it?
Yeah.
But that's the best dinner party question. What's your favorite grief theory?
What's my favorite grief theory? Exactly. It's from Louise Tonkin, and I think she was a psychotherapist, if I'm not wrong. And so she said that you need to imagine your grief as a bowl. Probably it has a specific size, and then when you start grieving, it's in a jar which is super small. So the jar is basically filled with your grief, and then it becomes, with time, the jar becomes bigger, 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 but the grief basically stays the same. So it stays with you, in you, but your life, or the life, grows around it, and your life becomes bigger, and with more events, and you just grow, you just develop yourself, and the grief, you start to accepting the fact that the grief is part of you and it stays with you.
Nice.
So I like that. This is my favorite grief theory.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way of thinking about it. It's as if we create this piece of grief, and then we what would the word be? We incorporate it into ourselves, and it becomes a part of us.
Exactly.
And then lives with us, forever.
It's a part of our story.
Yeah.
And and our life grows around it. So I love that. And that's what we discover new things. We have new adventures in life, so new experiences. So obviously our story is growing, and there is more to it. And then you feel like the grief becomes smaller, although it does not really become smaller. Grief is what it is, and but you become bigger.
Makes me think of those. This is my crazy mind. Makes me think of those. When a tree grows round something.
Yes.
there's a concrete post or something, and the tree grows round of it, and the tree gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But whatever it is that becomes a part of the tree and a part of the tree's story. And I think grief fits really well into that same idea.
Yeah, it's a nice image.
Yeah, I like trees. That. I like trees.
Yes, me too.
I kind of like, so William Ward, he has a completely different approach. So he's quite task based in his book.
So tell me more about it.
I'm not really a setter of tasks as a coach, but I kind of like, he breaks it down into 4 tasks. See what you think of these. So the first task that you have is to accept that it's happened. So we need to, because this kind of ties in, doesn't it, with that denial stage? Because sometimes it takes us quite a long time to accept that this thing's happened. Yeah. And as you said, until you accept that, which can look like, acceptance, or so we are we denying it? Are we accepting it? Ultimately, we have to acknowledge. And then the next task, which is the one that I really like, is that working through the pain thing. So we've actually got to work through it. It's a real task. That pain and that that feeling of someone missing. That's something that we have to work through.
Yeah.
That's a real tangible thing, isn't it? And I think if we accept it as such, and we actually, we need to experience it. We need to feel those feelings. And then the next task that he comes up with is adjusting to an environment without that person. So we need to accept it. That's the first thing. Then we need to work through the pain. Then we need to just adjust to that person or that thing not being there anymore.
Not being there with you anymore. Yes.
Yeah. And that might be, in a spiritual way, we might feel the missing, or in a physical way. And then the fourth task, and I think this is the one that I really love, is about finding enduring connection to that person or that thing that's missing, whilst embarking on a new life.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, and so for me, that it's much more woolly. It doesn't sort of say, but it kind of, for me, it makes sense as steps, because we can't work through the pain until we accept that somebody's gone.
It makes absolutely sense to me. I also love that theory a lot. And looking at the clients now I would say it fits super, super well. Yeah.
That's the one for me. That's the one that, I'm not hating on any of the others, and I see bits of everything in all of the others. But for me, that one's much more fluid, and there's lots of feeling stuff in there. And it feels less prescriptive. And I guess it's, for me, it's interesting if you can look back in retrospect at your own experience with grief. I know when a lot of my grief is around not physical death, so I'm adopted, and my childhood wasn't great, so I mourn a birth mother, and I mourn an adoptive mother that wasn't there.
So would you say this is applicable to you, your situation as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see, if I look at my birth mother, I can see some of the Kubrick stages, but it's not really, it doesn't really quite fit. But if I look at it from this sort of, task, this, this sort of task way of looking at it, and this is where I first found this model, was looking at my own grief. And accepting that it is what it is, that this thing has happened.
Yeah, acceptance is a super, super important step, in grief. I mean, it's but it's not easy to get there always, like when you are in so much pain, it's the most difficult part to learn acceptance, to get there. And it's exactly what you just described now with the theory. It's working through your pain, and there is, to me, unfortunately, no other way than working through it, because you need to face it, you need to talk about it, you need to share your story. And through sharing your story, through talking about this person you have lost, it's life-changing, really. it's step by step will be a relief, you know, sharing your story.
Yeah.
And this will lead you to acceptance.
I think if I remember rightly, and you have to, anyone that knows the theory better than I do, and it's not, you know, I think one of the words that William Walton uses in the acceptance thing is permanent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just about accepting the loss, it's about accepting the loss is permanent. And that, you know, that for me, that was a real, you know, because especially in my case, because both of those people were still alive. Probably, but I'm pretty certain at least one of them still is. I don't know about the other one.
Mm-hmm.
But accepting that loss was permanent and wasn't going to change.
Mm.
That, you know, because before that, I lived with, well, what if they change? What if they?
And how did you get there?
Do you know, for me, the way that I got there was for seeing things as they really were, and actually, it took meeting the birth mother.
Mm.
It took meeting the birth mother to understand that she is what she is, and that she's made a permanent decision nearly 60 years ago,
Mm.
and it wasn't going to change. But I think up until that stage, and we're not, you know, listen, Melanie, we're not talking very long ago, you know, so probably, you know, this was at the beginning of my change of life, because before that, you know, you know, this thing that we use sometimes in coaching, when that, or if that, then this, you know, so if that happens, then this will happen, and that'll be amazing, and everything will be fine, you know, and that is, that's denial, isn't it? You know, so again, we're going to pull a bit out of somebody else's ideas around grief. So there's that denial, you know, and I think, you know, we talk a lot, and you know, with your story, you talk to a lot of people that have lost children, and so do I, and in fact, that's how we met in the first place.
Mm.
But you know, that's something that we quite often find comes into those conversations. That, well, if I'd done this, you know, if I hadn't have had that glass of wine whilst I was 7 months pregnant, or
Mm.
if I hadn't done this, or if I'd made this choice, or you know, that if I'd decided that a childhood spent in hospital was a good thing, or, you know,
Mm.
a whole world of other things, if I'd picked a different dad, if
It does not it does not bring this person back, you know.
no,
And
no.
and it does not change any of it. So it's yeah, it's not really worth
No.
asking yourself these questions.
Yeah, because you can see that, you know, that's part of the denial stage, isn't it? You know, that you're denying the fact that this thing was going to happen and you couldn't have changed it.
Yeah. I had, yeah, I asked myself a million questions, of course, and
Yeah,
terrible. But it was, I mean, but what a relief to accept the fact. I mean, it was, I was like a new person the moment I accepted it the way it just happened, you know.
it,
So
it is what
and
it is.
yeah, yeah.
That sounds a bit cold, didn't it? And well, I didn't mean it to sound cold, but
No, it's not. It's just absolutely how it was, and how it is for many people. And very often, I have one client who was very good after the loss, like quite strong, doing well, and then fell into a into a complete hole. And was questioning everything suddenly again. So you cannot really say when this comes, and when you go through these stages, but they can come. And they also, as you said in the beginning, they can come much later. They can come years later. So you might think you are super good with it, and then a couple of years later, suddenly you find yourself questioning everything and asking yourself, like doubting yourself, doubting your decisions, and it's hard, it's painful. So just we would like to say that it's okay, it's okay to feel that way, and go through that. Just dive into these feelings and share these feelings, and there are a lot of ways to get out of it, but it's not always possible without help and support. So there are many situations and many people who can just go through it by themselves, but not everyone has a great support system. Not everyone has people around them who understand what they are going through. So it can be helpful to seek for some professional support.
Yeah, I said to someone today on a completely unrelated thing, maybe just talk to someone that's outside of the problem, that's not going through their own grief, because guarantee if you've suffered a loss, then all of the people around you, those people that are close to you, are probably suffering the same loss and are probably going through their own grief, and that can make it sometimes more difficult because, as we said, these models are not exact. Everybody goes through them at their own rate. Everybody, grieves in their own way. And that can sometimes, I see that in families a lot. We've got siblings, and one thinks they're okay, and one thinks their life's over. They're mourning the same person. They have the same background, the same lived experiences, but of course they don't. Everybody's relationship is different.
Very different. Yeah.
And all of the other things that underpin, because at some point in the future we'll talk about cumulative grief and how quite often one grief builds on another grief. We'll put that aside for another day, but things like that can show up as well, and so it's really not helpful to judge yourself against somebody else. And I was going to say something else, and that was that sometimes we think that we've accepted something, and we think that we've moved beyond that, and then, as she said, it might turn up a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years later, and I think something that I see quite a lot, and it's not a recognized theory. It's not something that anybody's ever said to me, but I wonder if sometimes we get almost like false stages where we might get like a false acceptance, and we might think that we've accepted something, or we might think that we've worked through the pain, or we might think that we've created we've adjusted to an environment where that person's not there. And then sometime afterwards, day, week, month, year, 10 years, we're back in that place again.
Yeah.
Because we just had a feeling that we were at a place, but actually we're not. And I see that with my clients a lot. They were like, I don't understand why this is showing up. I dealt with this stuff years ago.
But yeah, I just had I also had it in a client where we talked about a current grief, but figured out that there is an older grief which is so much more important to talk about it first. And it was really, really essential that we spoke about that loss. And it was not a death, you know, it was a different kind of loss. Was more like loss of identity type of thing. And yeah, super, super important. And we spent a couple of sessions on it, talking about it, until we then went on to the current loss. So yeah.
Yeah, my experiences are the same. You know, we're experiencing losses in some way or another constantly, almost through our life. And you know, we, again, another thing that we can talk about another time is this: there's some sort of hierarchical stuff that sometimes comes up in grief. You know, that one loss is more important than another, and that we need to start dealing with one thing and we need to forget about the other thing. Oh, that's fine. That was yesterday's loss, and that's not as important. You know, you ever had a client that's lost a pet and then lost a parent? It's, I sort of think it's one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with, because the dog ceased to be important in everybody else's eyes. But actually, the dog was there right through the illness that led up to the loss of the parent. Nobody except for that one person cared about the dog anymore. The dog was forgotten about. Actually, the person in the middle was really grieving a pet that they loved dearly, that had provided massive comfort and love during this other thing, whilst also grieving the parent.
Yeah, such a good example. And it's it's something I wanted to say also now again. It's like looking at your story, your grief story, and it's not just about, as we mentioned it before, it's not just about the death of a person. It can be of so many different reasons, you know, like not knowing your birth mother, grieving also the loss of the relationship you had, or a loss of a gender relationship, you know, to your parents. And it's such a strong grief you can have about something like that. And a pet is so emotionally important to so many people. Actually, I think everyone who has a pet is just so connected to it. And it's a very deep sadness when you lose a pet, you know. So yeah, there can be so many different reasons.
I think pets are always really interesting because I think they're really polarizing. Because I think if you've got a pet, you get it. I've not really met anyone that hasn't got a pet that really understands how that loss feels.
Yeah, I'm not a pet person at all, but I totally get the emotional connection, because I've talked to so many people who have a very deep connection to their pets, and I understand. But you are so right. Most of the people do not understand that feeling.
And I think probably we're really close to the end, because we're going to be good and we're going to stick to time. But it feels to me like nobody has a relationship the same as yours. No one. Every relationship's different. And the way that we grieve people is different. You know, even for the same person, they'll grieve one thing in one way, something else in a completely different way. But there's almost a mesh of interrelated grief in all of us. And we're, because we all have grief. You know, it's a you know, if that one thing goes towards reducing some of the stigma around grief, you know, it's this understanding that we've all got it. It's a part of all of us. And all of our previous griefs will impact on future grief. And probably the other way around. So every new grief will have an impact on stuff that we're already holding. And that's why you look at every single person, have you ever had two clients the same? I never have. They're all different. They're all different. They're all on their own journey. And these models are really helpful, but they can also be really unhelpful. If you rigidly apply a model or expect something to happen in a particular way, you'll be disappointed.
Absolutely. So I would also say, don't look at these theories, the stages. Just try to listen to your own body, to your own reactions, and go with the flow of grief.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you so much, Andy, for today's conversation. I think, as the last ones, super interesting topic, and I hope we can help a couple of people with our talks.
I'm sure they can. I love talking to you. Should we do another one? Shall we?
Definitely. I'm in.
Good. Right.
Okay.
It's lovely to see you.
Lovely.
Enjoy the rest of your world trip.
Thank you, Annie. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on Finding Light in Grief. We hope our conversation today brought you some comfort and insight. Remember, grief is a journey, and it's okay to take it one step at a time. We're here to walk you through it all. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with others who might benefit. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences, so feel free to reach out to us on social media. All the details are in the show notes, along with links to both our websites, where you'll find plenty of resources alongside details of our coaching offerings. Until next time, keep finding light in the darkness. Take care and be gentle with yourself. We are Melanie and Andy, and this is Finding Light in Grief.